if in fact this is happening, it's a strategy of weakness because they believe that somehow having a ceasefire right now ends the problem of Putin's aggression in Ukraine and Putin's greater designs, when in fact it strengthens Putin because he's said all along the Western leaders are feckless. He can outweight them because they'll grow impatient and he can achieve his nasty strategic objectives.
Well, as the conflict pauses in the Middle East, it continues apace in Ukraine. Today, the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv was hit with one of the biggest drone strikes since the start of the war. Meanwhile, the United States and Germany are believed to be in talks over an effort to persuade Ukraine to negotiate a peace deal with Russia. Well, let's speak to John Herbst now, who is a former US ambassador to Ukraine and now director of the Eurasia Centre at the Atlantic Council. John, good evening.
Good evening.
What do we know of this morning's strikes on Kyiv, John?
Well, this has been the largest in a long while. And of course, everyone's been expecting a resumption of last fall and winter's massive bombing campaign on infrastructure. The question is this the start of that? Or is this a one-off? And we'll only know after some time passes.
Okay. What do you make, John, of these briefings this weekend that the US and Germany are hinting at a peace deal?
I think the safest thing to say is we don't know if these rumors are true. We've seen such rumors before, but again, there's never been confirmation that they are true. What we do know, though, of course, is that the United States has been timid in sending the weapons Ukraine needs to conduct a substantial counteroffensive. And then we see reports, and this has happened multiple times over the past 7 or 8 months, that Western officials are concerned about the state of Ukraine's counteroffensive, which in fact their own timidity explains. So this leads people to reach conclusions that in fact the US and Germany, which have been the most timid actors in the alliance, are behind this. Would like to see a negotiation because they are too timid to give Ukraine what it needs. But again, that's speculation. I don't think these are facts.
Okay, so what's your gut telling you then about what the truth is there?
Well, the short answer is I don't know. I would say that one reason to think that this may be true is, again, reports you've had from time to time about Western officials wringing their hands about the state of the counteroffensive, when, again, if they look carefully on the ground, they know that their refusal to send the more capable weapons, more advanced weapons, explain that. But again, I just don't know.
Right. Let's just play with the notion, John, that the US and Germany are in talks about a peace deal. As far as these sort of reports are concerned, hinting that they may broadly along the lines of the present battlefront. So what would that actually look like?
Well, that would be a clear victory for Putin and a clear defeat, not just for Ukraine, but also for the United States and NATO. Putin's objectives are not limited to the land he's taken in Ukraine. They're not even limited to Ukraine. The draft treaty that he sent to NATO before the big invasion demonstrates his interest in territories, lands that used to be part of the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire, which includes a whole bunch of NATO allies. So Biden is right when he said in his op-ed and when he said in his Oval Office speech, if we don't stop Putin in Ukraine, we may have to face him in the Baltic states, which would be much harder to defend and which would involve NATO troops. But at the same time, they don't arm Ukraine in a way that would make it possible for Ukraine to take back land. I think that's principally driven by the fact they've been spooked by Putin's nuclear threats. But the notion that somehow they're trying to drive Ukraine into negotiation is not far-fetched. Again, I just don't know if it's true.
So that though seems remarkable to me, though, John. I mean, let's just deal with that at face value, that the US and Germany would be attempting to push Ukraine, or at least nudge Ukraine into a peace deal that would present a victory for Putin against both Germany and the US. That doesn't quite add up to me. I can't understand that.
Well, I agree that this demonstrates a certain lack of strategic vision and strength in following a policy. And again, Biden's already laid out the stakes, but the policy doesn't fully reflect that, and that's quite unfortunate. In Germany, we haven't seen the stakes laid out that clearly, but again, especially the Social Democratic Party in Germany has been always not just timid on Russia, but been largely an appeasement, followed a policy of appeasement. You can't claim that that's what's going on now with Scholz, but clearly Germany is the weakest among the major NATO allies as it confronts a very, very aggressive Putin. So they'll put their heads in the sand and say, well, Putin's objectives are just about saving his face by taking some territory in Ukraine. That is truly naive analysis.
There is, of course, another significant player in this, and that is Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. Is he likely to even entertain the idea of a conversation about a peace deal?
He's made clear right now that he's not. So I think, and of course, the administration, and I think also the chancellery in Germany, do not want to be seen in the position of pushing the victim to accept an unacceptable peace. So if it's happening, in the shadows. But again, it's not clear to me that this is the actual policy in either Washington or Berlin.
What is the sense in even hinting at this being, if we're to take this at face value, somebody within either the US or Germany or possibly both are briefing this, right, to journalists. If that weakens the US and Germany, it's not what Zelensky wants. It proposes something that would be a victory to Putin, presumably in itself strengthens Putin, something for him to say, look, there you go, there's a chink in their armour.
Correct.
What is the actual sense in briefing this?
Well, again, if in fact this is what's happening, it reflects.
But just not so much on the fact that whether it's happening or not. But one thing that has happened is it has been briefed. We do know that it has been briefed. It might not necessarily be happening, but it's been somebody somewhere has floated the point to a journalist, haven't they?
If presumably, yes, I say presumably, but because we don't know if a figure of authority in one of these governments, at say at least the deputy secretary level, deputy minister level, were briefing this, that would indicate that this is something they're trying to encourage. But it could be coming from a different individual, a different form. So again, I spent 31 years in the State Department. I know how these things work. I'm not saying that these reports are false. I just am not certain that they're true. I don't have any doubt that there are individuals in not just these two governments, but others that would like to see this war go away, again, because they think Putin would stop with part of Ukraine when he won't. But whether those are definitive characters in the governments in question is a whole different question. But again, the overall policy lends itself to people assuming this is what's going on, and that's truly unfortunate.
And so my sort of question there, really, John, was we're not sort of seeing here something here that's a double bluff potentially, are we? Or some sort of clever strategy that they're doing something that seems counterintuitive, but is actually for a greater goal.
It's a strategy. If in fact this is happening, it's a strategy of weakness, because they believe that somehow having a ceasefire right now ends the problem of Putin's aggression in Ukraine and Putin's greater designs, when in fact it strengthens Putin, because he's said all along the Western leaders are feckless. He can outweight them because they'll grow impatient, and he can achieve his nasty strategic objectives, which cut against our interests, Western interests, over time, because the leaders are just not strong enough. It would play to that in ways that are very much against Western interests.
John, really insightful. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you, John.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. John Herbst, who is former US ambassador to Ukraine, now director of the Eurasia Centre at the Atlantic Council. Okay, we're going